Hey, Patreons, welcome back to the Spotlight. This is where we get the opportunity to talk to creators and entertainers in pop culture. Todd is here with me again, of course, and we are talking to Fabian. And I'm not even going to screw up your last name. Fabian, your last name, please.
We're going to run out of the entire time frame if you don't try to pronounce it.
Nicieza?
Nicieza.
Nicieza.
Perfect, Todd. Thank you.
That's
I
the
took 4
second
years
time
of
in a
Spanish. I had to pay off sometime.
that's the second.
He's heard it before. That's why.
Yeah, the second time in a row. J.M. DeMatteis, I never got that right. DeMatteis. Oh, I have no idea. We had him on several weeks back. But anyway, gosh, it's so great to have you here. You're a legend in Marvel. You're a legend in DC and in other places of the industry. It's awesome to see you. And we've met. We met several weeks back in
We did.
Detroit.
Yeah. Detroit. I'm also a legend in my own mind too.
So am I, and so is Todd, but him more than me. But we'll get the ball rolling. I always start my interviews with the same question. It could either be boring or it could be great. How did you get into this world? How did you get into being a creator in the comics world?
I'd been reading comics since I was a little kid. Interviewed at both Marvel and DC out of college with a degree in communications. Interviewed in the direct sales departments of each company, but didn't get the job at either, understandably and justifiably so. And then 2 years later, a teammate on the Putnam Berkeley Publishing softball team had a coworker who has a sister who works at Marvel, and she's looking for an assistant in the manufacturing department. And it pays a little bit more than what I was making at the time. And New York City publishing in 1985, you're not making a lot. So I interviewed for the job and I got it, and knew immediately that manufacturing for Marvel books is not where I wanted to be. And 4 months later, the guy who was hired instead of me in 1983 was looking to hire an assistant. And I moved over to the department to work with him. And then we got a boss over us. And all of a sudden, we had a promotions and publicity department at Marvel for the first time. And I became Marvel's advertising manager, did all of the house ads, promo posters, giveaway stuff at conventions, all of that you saw through the late 80s in stores. That was all my job. Wow. And little by little started to sell my writing internally. Editor needs an inventory story here, and editor needs an annual backup there. And I just kept plugging away, and in a couple of years after that, I got my first monthly gig, superhero gig, I should say, because I was quickly the monthly writer on Sci-Force New Universe, but most Marvel editors didn't count that.
That was my favorite New Universe book. Mark Teixeira's artwork. I love that book.
New Universe is a total favorite of our mutual associate, Kurt Krug, the guy who introduced us. He is a New Universe junkie. Well, yes, any Facebook page that has to do with Marvel in the 80s and New Universe, he's in there and he writes 3 paragraphs about it. So
look, there's a worm in at least one apple of every bushel. So
he listens
after I started writing New Warriors, I just juggled the full-time 9-to-5 job with the freelance writing until the freelance writing was just kind of overwhelming me. And I'm not a math major, but around 94, I realized I'm making 9/10 of my income writing, and it takes me 9/10 of my day to do my full-time job. So the math didn't work. So I left the staff job in 95, but I was on staff at Marvel for 10 years. So
oh my gosh,
I never would have gotten that kind of an opportunity and been able to take advantage of it as quickly as I did had I not been working there full time.
Yeah. Wow. Awesome. So you hacked away. It was elbow grease, and you just kept working and working.
In my experience, the stories are usually roughly the same. It's a combination of ridiculous hard work, a little bit of talent, a lot of savvy about managing and how to negotiate people, and a lot of luck. And all of that combines, and my career is really not all that different. I'm not the most talented writer in the world, but I'm talented enough. And
terrific.
I'm savvy about how to manage people, and I'm very, very professional about turning my work in a manner that it almost always provides less work for the editor.
Right.
And when you're dealing with work for hire, mainstream monthly publication, editors are so overwhelmed that the less work they need to do on any given book is a benefit to them.
Oh, I can believe it. Oh, that's fantastic. Good deal. Good deal. Todd.
So one thing that was really intriguing when I was looking at your past, you were an editor of Star Comics. So Star Comics is something that I just like.
Dumb.
I don't know how that started, but obviously the big star was Spider-Ham. But out of that was like there was like the Planetary and a bunch of licensed books, He-Man, Animax.
Were the real sellers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
Star Comics started in the early '80s, just as an attempt, like all good publishers should, to try to expand their marketplace. And they wanted to try to ensure that they could develop 6, 7, 8-year-old readers who would then become 12, 13, 14-year-old superhero readers.
Right, like us.
Many of us read Archie or Richie Rich or Hot Stuff as one of our first books that we read, and that was the goal. It never sold well. Some of the licensed books sold very well. Like Alf was always a really solid seller. It ran for 50 issues. But I inherited the line when the line was kind of petering out based on its original mandate. It no longer really had original content created that Marvel owned, like you said, Planetary, Spider-Ham. It didn't have that anymore. It was almost exclusively licensed stuff. So I inherited a few titles, all of which were ending, and we were launching Barbie and Barbie Fashion and Ren and Stimpy, and a few others. And I had offbeat stuff like Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventures, which you really can't categorize as kids' book.
With Evan Dorkin as a writer who was amazing.
With the phenomenal Evan Dorkin.
Was that also, if I can interject, the Kid and Play comic? Because
I did Kid and Play also. I did William Shatner's Tech World. I did a Hook movie adaptation, which was one of the craziest working experiences of my life.
Oh my gosh.
So a little bit of everything. We were originally going to do a Terminator comic book with Cameron's input, and we even met with him out in California, believe it or not, the day of the LA riots.
Oh my God.
But the deal never we went straight from a meeting with Cameron through the area that was going to have riots happening, and it just an hour and a half later, 2 hours later. Then we had dinner with Stan Lee that night. It was me, Tom DeFalco, and Mike Hobson, the publisher. We had dinner with Stan Lee that night. We had to drive him back to his house early because the National Guard was starting to close down.
Oh, God.
Wow.
So we were right by the Beverly Mall, our hotel. So we went back to our hotel as they were cordoning off blocks with military personnel showing up, National Guard. They had tanks out to protect the Beverly Hills Mall. So that was our enjoyable night during the LA riots.
Oh my gosh.
So So I did a lot of that. Ren and Stimpy was one of our best sellers, quite frankly. It sold 300,000 copies a month, and introduced.
I think I still have that first issue with the. I think it was a smelling cover.
The smell thing, yeah. Introduced Dan Slott to comic books because he was my intern, and I hired him to write the book.
Funny. Oh my God.
Yeah. So it was great experience for me. They weren't necessarily fun books to edit, but it was great experience because I learned a tremendous amount about contracts, about negotiating and discussing difficult subject matter or difficult decisions with licensors from other companies. It taught me a lot about how to teach and explain comic books because I constantly had to do that to licensing departments from the various companies that we were working with. It made me have to fly to LA like 3 times in 1 year just to keep teaching new Mattel licensing departments what comic books were. So it was all interesting.
I've been in that building, that Mattel building that was next to the hotel we stayed in when my wife and I were out in LA a couple of years ago. They have a store at the bottom, if it's the same one.
Yeah. So, I think it might still be the same one. We're talking about like 92 and 93. So who knows how many offices they've gone through. But I was at Mattel just 10-ish years ago or so, and I think it was the same complex.
Yeah. My wife and I were getting back from cruise. My only trip to LA. After looking forward to another one, hoping to go to Star Wars Celebration in a couple of years. But I digress. So you are behind been involved with some of the big ones that have really taken off in the theaters. Deadpool, obviously. The Thunderbolts, not as much as we would have liked, but I love that movie, but it wasn't, really the core group. And
I liked the
X-Force,
movie. I did enjoy the movie that they
me
called
too.
Thunderbolts quite a bit.
Yeah, yeah. No, I told it's Thunderbolts asterisk, so they flipped it and blah. That probably didn't help. But what's another title that you have worked on that you pour your heart into that you were like, I would love to see that take off on the big screen. Like it would do your heart good to just be like, phew.
It would only be creator-owned stuff at this point. I
Yeah,
don't, I don't. I have zero necessarily rooting interest in having a new Warriors movie made or a, Gambit or whatever. It's all you gotta understand. I'm 60. I'm almost 64 years old. All right. I, I, I was able to compartmentalize my understanding of work for hire a very, very long time ago.
fair, fair.
So I don't have any kind of a big to do. I rather than a new Warriors movie or a legitimate Thunderbolts movie, I would personally much rather they make a Deadpool movie every year because I get a bigger check when they make a Deadpool movie. So that's ultimately my honest answer.
I admire that. I admire
All the
that.
other stuff doesn't. It's they own it. They can do what they want with it. Sometimes they do some good stuff with it. Sometimes they
Yeah,
don't. It's all up to them.
yeah, fair. Totally, totally. You got it. All right, Todd.
So when I was checking out your website, something interesting, I guess it makes sense now after you told me about your licensing and you're working on some contract deals, that you work on a group called Starry World Development, and you work with IPs. So Hot Wheels, Pirates of the Caribbean, Tron, Halo, Transformers. That's pretty cool. So what's that work like?
It was interesting, and I made a very concerted decision 20 years ago that I couldn't just be a comic book writer, both because I wouldn't be able to I wouldn't be able to earn the kind of income I needed to earn as just a comic book writer, because every generation of editors tends to hire the majority of the people they hire their own peer group, and I
Yeah,
understand that. And I was already aging out of the previous peer group of editors. Combined with the fact that there were no longer royalties on the sales of books anymore after 2000-ish because the books weren't selling well enough. So then that incentive isn't there because page rate alone is barely enough to make a living, quite honestly, unless you're writing 3, 4 books a month, which very few people do.
yeah, right.
So I decided I wanted to do other stuff, and it was at the same exact time that a friend of mine who had been one of my editors at Acclaim Comics called me up and asked me to help him out with some work he was going to be doing with Mattel on Hot Wheels. And it was a pretty ambitious marketing project for their Highway 35 launch they were going to do, and we did all kinds of work for it. And that turned into a business opportunity to do the same kind of work for other companies. So it ended up becoming part IP management, consultation, and new content development, or at least content road mapping, showing the franchise holders where they can take the content, how they can extrapolate it. And the Hot Wheels stuff ended up getting us a job at Disney working on Pirates of the Caribbean. And with pretty much really top level executives, like the fun part about it is that we didn't come in at the bottom. We were getting hired and having meetings with the very top level executives. And I mean, like Amy Pascal when she's running Sony,
Oh,
and Tom Roth
Whoa.
when he's interviewing us about to do something at Universal. So it was big wig stuff, and we were on set a lot of the time, interviewing a lot of the creative shareholders, whether they be actors or producers or directors or writers. And then depending on the individual job, we'd consolidate the work. And like Pirates of the Caribbean was over 800 pages of material that we developed for them,
Oh my
and we
gosh.
developed a whole Bible for them. It was almost like a cross between a DK encyclopedia and a marketing content guideline. And we did it for a lot of movie companies and a lot of toy companies. The list of credits, I guess, is on the website. I forgot about that, but going through it is ridiculous because it's top level companies with top level franchises. I got to call Jeff Johnson was a friend of mine. from my comic book days was working as a storyboard artist on the Transformers, and we had worked with Mattel on the Transformers, or I'm sorry,
from the '80s
on the Transformers Bible. At one point, when they were doing a relaunch plan, they were trying to consolidate the differences between the movie and the cartoon, and they wanted to make the cartoon its own consistent, cohesive thing apart from the movies. So he was working on one of the animated series, and they were using our Bible. They called it the doorstop because the Bible, Hasbro didn't pay us to do a full color book and digital guide like we had been doing for other companies. We were producing these gorgeous coffee table sized books, but only like 50 copies of them. And digital, everything was digital. So they had PDFs of everything in full color. We had graphic design on them, the works. I mean, if you saw this stuff, it looks like a professionally done coffee table book from a publisher. But Hasbro didn't want to pay that money. So all they did is print out like 600 pages of Transformers stuff. And they gave it to all the storyboard artists on these big rubber banded bundles, and all of them had to have it because it had all the characters, all the identities, all their information, a visual of them, all the weapons, all the vehicles. It had everything. So Jeff had it at the bottom of his desk, like a book stop, they called it.
Keep the desk from falling over.
Yeah, and I did that consistently along with other stuff on the side here and there for 15 years. It kind of petered out a bit right before COVID, and I started to want to do other things. When I wrote my first novel, I shifted my direction. So they're still doing stuff, and I'm open to do stuff with them because they've been friends of mine for 20 years. But nothing's clicked yet. We thought we almost had something happening with Jerry Anderson's company out in London. For all the what's it, ITC? What's it called? Jerry Anderson did Captain Scarlet, and he did all those.
Is it like the marionette puppets?
Yeah.
Was
the company that did all of that? He also did Space 1999. He's produced a lot of shows. He is still in working with one of the. It's not BBC. It's a different British production company and network, I think. But it doesn't. And I was going to do that because I wanted to jump in on that one. That would be fun. But it didn't interest me that much. The last thing I worked on with Jeff and Mark at Starlight Runner was Ultraman, which they're still working on to this day. They're doing stuff. A lot of the Ultraman stuff you've seen happening in the States in the last 5 years or so is really a result of Starlight Runner and a licensing guy out in California, along with Toho Studios in Japan.
Wow.
Yeah, I think there's a Netflix series. Is that what it's based on?
That was Toho making a separate deal, but now Jeff has been engaged in consulting with them. But the comic books you saw out of Marvel, the stuff they're doing, all of that stuff was being fermented here. A whole bunch of live shows that they're doing now more often. They took this live show concept that they do in Tokyo in Japan on a regular basis, and they're trying to export it to the different places here.
Yeah.
But I'm not a huge Ultraman fan, so I sort of like did. I did the work for about a year.
I knew it as a kid, and when it was on reruns on TV.
I don't want to keep working on this.
Isn't he the silver and red guy? Am I thinking?
It goes like this.
There you go. So it's kind of like you can.
Charlie, man, anybody who has as many little toy figures behind them as you do has to know all of this stuff.
I was about to say I have the Japanese Spider-Man figure. They made him for Marvel Legends a couple of years ago. He's back there. You can't quite make him out, but I swear to God, he might be in the front of that top row. Not 100% sure. But back to Marvel, because I'm always back to Marvel. When you and I were chatting at Motor City, we were talking about Star Trek because that's my life, and we were talking about Enterprise trivia. You did great, by the way. I think you might have missed half a one. But my wife and I were there to do Star Wars trivia, which is how we ended up talking about it. But you were telling me that in like 96, 97 is when you were departing Marvel, and you didn't get your chance to connect with. They had the license at the time for 2 or 3, maybe 3 or 4 years. I think
something like that. Yeah.
Before IDW took it over. Now, I was reading in Memory Alpha or somewhere while I was researching you that you have a brother who's also in the business. He was associated with that, wasn't he?
Yes, he was. Wait, did he write? Did he write or did he edit one of those books? He wrote some of it.
Okay.
I think he and I were going to write it together, just from a scheduling standpoint.
Yeah.
I don't remember. I know that I wanted to do Deep Space Nine, and Bob Harris wanted me to do Deep Space Nine. And then the Acclaim stuff opportunity came up, so I wasn't going to be able to do it. But my brother might have still gotten to write a couple issues of Deep Space Nine. I don't remember.
Gotcha.
I didn't read the books. I didn't read much of what they did. I only read a couple of the things they did because I was busy, running Flame, and I just didn't have the bandwidth.
And it's funny, I probably haven't read them in almost 30 years, but I collect them because I've sold comics. And that's what I was doing when I saw you Motor City. I look for old out of stuff print and print stuff.
Did they ever do trade paperbacks of that?
Never. No, it's just like with DC with DC Star Trek, it's mostly gone. Yeah. That's why I collect it, because you can't find it anywhere else. But my question was, so DS9, I know you mentioned that to me. What's a great DS9 story that you would have loved to have done? You know what I mean?
I don't honestly.
No.
First of all, I get paid to write, so I usually
can't release the idea
unless I'm being paid to do them. I know that I had one idea in mind that I also wouldn't have minded doing as a novel, which was but they've all been done. There's almost no Star Trek ideas that I'm going to bounce off you. You're going to go, oh, that's original. No,
you never know. It could happen.
At the time, I really wanted to do a religious storyline that would call into question the Bajorans' faith in what they believed in, and call into questions what they thought was the emissary. I'm pretty sure. I don't remember whether the DS9 comic was going to take place or was taking place while DS9 was still on the air.
It was. I'm thinking if it came out in '96, that would have been season 4 or 5, and it was on.
Okay, yeah, all right. So Cisco was still there and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So really, I wanted because a lot of that emissary stuff and a lot of the Bajoran stuff was a little nebulous. They'd never really wanted to concretize it, so they kind of skirted around its details. I wanted to do a storyline that would use another alien race to really call into question all of that and create conflict for Bajor. So I know I had that as a storyline in mind. I know I wanted to do something with Gul Dukat because I love Gul Dukat.
Oh God, best film of all time, in my opinion.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to do like a Garrick Dukat thing. But the show did it too at some point. I think in 4, 5, or 6 seasons.
Yeah.
Didn't it? Wasn't there an episode with Dukat and Garrick together?
They were standing back to back fighting Klingons in a hallway when the Klingons were invading the station. That was season 4 when Worf came on. That big long episode.
Wasn't there an actual episode of just the two of them though? I don't remember.
I know there was an episode of just Dukat. Todd's like, oh, Star Trek, but there was an episode of just Dukat.
I love DS9, but Charlie is the.
Yeah,
I just rewatched it a few years ago. Seasons. I started with season 3. I skipped over seasons 1 and 2.
Yeah, definitely do. Definitely. The only, it was funny. I was talking with, and then I'll stop talking about Star Trek. But Harris Yulin passed away yesterday. He played,
I read.
Maritza in the first great epic episode of DS9 at the end of season 1, Duet. So, all right.
Yeah, no, that was an excellent episode, and they had sparks in the first 2 years, which really showed you what it could be.
Yeah.
It took them until the middle to the end of season 3 to start to manifest it, and then for me, 4, 5, 6 is the best Star Trek we've really ever had on television.
Yeah, I agree. I was born into Deep Space Nine, not literally, but TNG. That's what I started watching. But DS9 will always be the best. I don't think they'll ever.
And I'm older, so I was watching Star Trek reruns because I was too young when we came to this country to watch it at 10 o'clock at night. But when it originally aired, but the second it started running on repeats on WPIX channel 11 in the New York area, my brother and I just devoured it. Like 69, 68. When was it first on WPX?
66 to 69 was original run, and then in the 70s it took off in syndication.
Yeah, but it started real early on PIX. I know it had to because my brother was Kirk and I was Chekhov for one Halloween, and that had to be 1970 or 71.
There you go.
We wouldn't have known it otherwise,
Well, in that time in between that, the animated series was on in 73 and 74.
Yeah, and we watched that, and we went to one of the first Star Trek cons in New York and Manhattan. My brother and I both went to the Marvel cons that Marvel put on in 75 and then another in 76. My brother and I went to both of those. And we also went to a Star Trek con, at least one in New York City. at the time. Those were really early cons.
Yeah, the very and then I swear to God, I'll stop. The very first one was in I think '73 in a hotel basement somewhere, and I think Jimmy
it's the hotel right across from Penn Station.
Jimmy
they tore that building down, but that's where the Marvel Con was also.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, Jimmy Doohan was a guest, and he thought, oh, well, maybe we'll get 200 people, and there were like 5,000 people.
Oh yeah. No, I went to. I might have gone 74.
Okay.
I might have gone because I think we went to the Star Trek one before we went to the Marvel one, and the Marvel one was definitely 75.
Yeah, that's
so
awesome.
Cool. Sorry, Todd.
I love it. Okay, I'm all right.
No, that's amazing. There was I can't remember what it was called. It was a short, like little background series on, I think, Netflix, where they talked about one of the first Marvel cons, and it had a lot of great stories from a lot of the creators, had dramatization. So I'll have to find it out. I'll let you know what it is, but it was great talking about that first con. Very cool.
My great Marvel con story is they had all the guests that were there were editors or writers at Marvel. Were all on a row of tables, and you had your program book, and you just walked down the row, and each one signed it. I didn't know who half of them were because a lot of them didn't have pictures at the time. And also some of their names were illegible when they signed it, which made me think even at 10 years old, 11 years old, that I'm going to make sure my autograph is legible. So my brother and I get through the line, and then we're looking at our program book to see who signed it. And like, oh, Len Wein signed it. Oh, that was Len Wein. Which one was he?
Wow.
And Marv Wolfman signed it. And then there's one, I can't really make it out. I go, who's this Chris Claremont?
We talked to him a couple weeks ago, actually.
I think it was just as Giant Size X-Men was coming out, but he wasn't writing it yet. And I didn't know Chris's name from War is Hell, which was the book he was doing at the time. But within a month or two, when I saw his name in the X-Men credits, I go, that's the guy who signed the book.
Yeah, right. Oh my gosh.
Wow.
That's awesome. Well, Todd, last question is yours before I do the wrap up so that we don't get chopped here.
Yeah, this is more of a recent book you just put out, and this is Godzilla vs. X-Men. It just came out last month, and it's funny because obviously Godzilla has been everywhere forever, and when you're doing something like that, I always wonder, I'm like, is it in continuity? Does it matter? Is it just, this is a kind of just come up with the craziest story you could come up with? Like when you work on something like that, when it's two properties, but different companies own it, what's your approach to something like that?
They had pretty specific parameters they were going with.
Okay.
Gotcha.
They were sticking to specific Godzilla continuity. They wanted to do it by the decade. So there's a 60s book that was done, so the Marvel characters would be as if it was the 60s. They did a 70s one. I think that the Spider-Man one was the 80s one because he might have been in the black suit.
Oh, that's my Spider-Man.
They wanted 90s to be the X-Men, so it's the 90s version of Godzilla and whoever he was going up against design-wise or style-wise, and the 90s X-Men, which I had written, but they wanted it to skew closer to the cartoon kind of approach. So basically, I did it as if it were a Godzilla appearing in an animated episode of the X-Men. That's all I tried to do.
Oh, nice.
And that was it. So they had parameters for all of them. I didn't read all of the plots that the other guys had done, but I just knew that there were kind of rules in place. So the material that Toho sent me was 90s stuff. It was 90s Godzilla stuff.
Rubber suit Godzilla.
Yeah.
Love
it. I mean, they don't think of it as Rubber Suit Godzilla, though, Todd. They think of it as Godzilla.
Yeah, come on, Todd, now.
That's true. That's true.
We can't apply our
I thought of it as Rubber Suit Godzilla since I was 11 years old, but they think of it as Godzilla.
Just because that's what it is doesn't mean that's what it is. I mean, come on now.
Respect the material, as they would say.
Material. I say I'll throw this to Todd. We'll read that book and we'll talk about it on one of our spinner rack because we have a Patreon comic book show, so I think that's going to be one. I'm throwing it down. All right. Well, to wrap it up, I was asked the same question. What else do you have going on right now? You just had the Godzilla. What else are you working on?
Well, I got the second. Oh, first up is a really fun story I wrote for Savage Sword of Conan for Heroic Signatures and Titan Comics. It'll appear at the end of this month. It's a Cull backup story drawn by Sean Chen. So the lead story is a Conan story. It's by written and drawn by Patrick Zerker, who's an old friend of mine and coworker. And then I have the Cull backup story. It's the first time we've seen Cull in this new Titan Comics relaunch. with Heroic
Sweet.
Signature, and I had a real fun time because I never got to work in really a lot. I co-wrote one issue of Conan with Kurt Busiek a while ago, but it was really more Kurt than me. So one of the first times I got to work in the world of REH, and I really enjoyed it because I've been a reader since I was 11, 12 years old.
Yeah.
So I really liked it a lot. That comes out at the end of this month. It's Savage Sword of Conan #9. We are working on the second arc of the Free Agents series from Image, which is Kurt Busiek and I co-writing and Stephen Mooney drawing. Ironically enough, just a couple hours ago, Stephen Mooney delivered the entire first issue of art, which technically is issue number 8. So the second arc will probably appear, I doubt late this year. I don't want to push it. Probably very early next year.
Okay. Cool.
And then I signed a contract, and it was just announced today in Publishers Marketplace for a new novel. So my third novel will be coming out from St. Martin's Press. I guess a little while after I actually write it. So I am working right now on my third novel, which is a psychological thriller called The Sin Puppet.
Ooh.
And it's about a guy who has had amnesia since a car accident when he was 16 that took the life of his family, and he spent the last 20 years trying to create a technological way to retrieve his lost memories. And he does so, but an accident leads his memories to land basically in the minds of other people in his small town. And what he did not know, because he was an amnesiac, is that those were all memories best left forgotten.
Oh my gosh.
So
wow.
what happens if you retrieve the memories of a really, really bad person who was you? That's the hook. But he can, but by finding the people who have his memories, he can stop them from doing the things they're doing and retrieve them. So every time he stops someone from doing something bad, he's absorbing another bad part of himself back into himself.
I want to read this
Sin
book.
Eater. Yeah.
That's great. I want to read this book hands down. We'll stay in touch about that. Well, cool. Well, we will wrap it up. Oh my gosh, Fabian, this has been awesome. And
Thank you.
It's been great to have met you first, and I love talking about the Star Trek stuff. And this has been great. So thank you so much. Tell people where they can find you out there.
I'm readily available on pretty much all the social media platforms. On Twitter, on Blue Sky, it's at Fabian Nicieza. On Facebook, my DMs are usually open, and I respond to you unless you're an ass. And then sometimes I even respond to you if you are an ass. You just won't like what I say. And I'm on Instagram under F Nicieza. So I'm pretty open and out there about my social media presence.
Good deal. I'll go give you a follow on all those as soon as I get off of here. So that wraps us up, Fabian. This has been so great. Patreons, thanks for tuning in. If you are listening to this on our network feed, patreon.com/Secret Friends Unite. Listen to the network for 7 days for free, and then stay with us and hear all these great interviews. I've been Charlie. This is Todd, and we have been talking to Fabian. And I will say good evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Fabian.
Guys. Appreciate it.
This podcast is part of the Secret Friends Unite podcasting network, available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and podcast services around the galaxy, as well as video on our YouTube channel. You can support Secret Friends Unite by becoming a Patreon member, get bonus programs and more over at patreon.com/secretfriendsunite. Join our Discord community for even more discussions on all things geek. For all the latest updates on Secret Friends Unite, make sure to follow us on Threads at secret.friends.unite and visit secretfriendsunite.com. Find our merchandise at TeePublic and Redbubble. Thanks for listening, and may the Force live long and prosper.